As leaders, when we are performance managing, when we are recognizing that an individual is not quite hitting an expectation or really not hitting an expectation, breaking promises, violating those expectations, or even behaving poorly. So whether it is technical or behavioral skills that they are not hitting the mark on, then what we need to do is we need to step into those conversations, number one. And then number two, as we navigate through the conversation, we're going to hear the things that are contributing to why they're missing the mark. And those things will often straddle the line between motivation and ability. When we think about ability, sometimes strategies to close the gap on abilities are really simple. If it's a personal ability, then we train and we coach and we mentor and we ensure deliberate practice and observation, and we consistently are behind that individual to develop that skill set. When it is a social ability, meaning individuals around them are either helping or hindering, and generally if we're not hitting an expectation, it's hindering their performance, then we as a leader need to lean on the team, not just speaking with the individual that we're addressing the performance management expectation with, but also we have to talk with the team and ensure that the team is supporting each other. So we might have to do some team building, dynamic team engagement. We might have to be looking for, is there dysfunction within my team that I need to address as a leader? And then finally, we could have structural or organizational ability barriers, like individuals can't access information, or they don't have the tools. I'm grabbing my computer here. They don't have the tools to actually do their job. And when it comes to something like a structural or an organizational barrier, it is never the individual, the employee's responsibility to close that gap. It's your responsibility as a leader. So how long are our employees going with ability barriers that are getting in the way of doing their work that we as leaders may not be aware of? And how can we become aware of those things? First is by recognizing there are generally three sources for ability barriers: our own personal ones, social ones, and organizational or structural ones. And then it's about claiming responsibility as a leader as to how you help navigate those spaces, what you are 100% responsible for, the organizational, what you are about 75% responsible for, which is the team dynamic. You need the team to reciprocate or close the other 25%. And then the personal, which you are responsible to call people up on and provide training and advancement for, but you're not responsible to actually execute on it. The individual is responsible to execute on developing their skills. So when you think about the emotional intelligence elements related to this, as a leader, we're going to be considering that, one, we really have to get ourselves right. We can't go like a bull in a china shop into performance management situations with our opinion, with I know what's going on and all of this negativity around it. We do have to go into it as leaders with a very objective understanding of what's going on, and very rarely do we have all of the information. So starting those accountability conversations requires that we get ourselves right first. We separate our fact from our fiction, our storytelling, our interpretation of what's going on, and we go in with simple facts, really succinct, describing what we're expecting and what we're observing, and inviting the individual into the conversation so then we can start to hear motivation barriers and ability barriers. And as we hear them, the picture gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And it often isn't until we know exactly what those barriers are for the individual that we can come up with an actual solution, a game plan with them. In fact, from them. Our encouragement when we discover from them what those barriers are is, well, how do you want to close that gap? How do you want to close that gap? And then how can I help close that gap? And that is a very collaborative conversation, which marks for us that an important skill in accountability conversations is the interpersonal relationship skill. Dr. Kim Scott, in her book, Radical Candor, talks about caring before we challenge. So the interpersonal relationship skills from emotional intelligence are mimicking this same formula. It's that we have to demonstrate to the individual that we care about them and want to help before we challenge them to overcome the barrier. We have to let them know that there is support and encouragement. We have to let them know what our intention is behind wanting to do this. It's not to reach the end of the road in which we're firing them, it's to actually excel their skill set. One of the things we can do as leaders is really pay attention to how we're operating in this space. And any of those gaps we're noticing where we are the barrier, where our own emotions get in the way of doing this really well, is where we start to work on proficiency, high levels of proficiency in our leadership excellence. And as we close those gaps, we'll recognize that those conversations are more and more influential and impactful.